Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Hurst. I'm the Senior Associate Dean for Executive Education at the MIT Sloan School of Management. And welcome to our latest LinkedIn Live event, where I am joined today by my friend and colleague, Professor Bill Aulet, who is the leader, managing director of the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship and a professor of practice at the MIT Sloan School of Management. Bill, we're delighted that you have joined us today for this discussion about your work in the field of disciplined entrepreneurship. For those of you that maybe are not familiar with Bill, and it's hard to imagine that anybody might not be, Bill is himself a serial entrepreneur with some successes and not so successes, that maybe he'll share some of those stories with us during the course of the next hour or so. And he has been the leader now for a decade of the Entrepreneurship Center at MIT, where he's gathered a wealth not only of experience of teaching and encouraging entrepreneurship among our students, both degree students on campus and executives really all over the world through executive education programs and other endeavors. So it's great to see people joining us from all over the world. And maybe we could start just to make sure everyone's keyed in on the LinkedIn Live functionality. Let us know where you're calling in from. I see some are already posting. Great to see you from all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, richly, absolutely everywhere. That's fantastic. And when you've, I see a hello from Kendall Square even, so it's truly global. Yeah. So when you told us where you're from, Bill asked me to ask you to answer a question with one word, just to get us going. And that question is, how do you feel today? Please just tell us one word only. That's your challenge. How are you feeling today, right now? I see those starting to come in. As they come in, let's get right to it. Please feel free to put questions that occur to you or comments into the feed. Bill and I will have a conversation, but I will also be keeping an eye on the feed, and we'll try to pull out some of your questions as they come through and put them to Bill. But to get us started, Bill, as you think about the last 18 months or so, all of the enormous changes that we have all made to pivot, to use that word, to a different way of working and a different way of running our organizations and businesses. How has that shift to virtual, in your view, affected the field of entrepreneurship as you experience it and as you study it and as you teach it? And how does that compare to in person? What's been your experience?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and hello to everybody out there. Hello to all the EDP people. I should close my door. 1 second. The students are back. Hopefully, the digital era will be over. But it's great. It's great to start to see people in person. We'll talk a little bit more about that with the stories. But I think first of all, this whole kind of COVID pandemic and subsequent kind of chaos through, the unrest in the United States, the climate change, has made clearer than ever that entrepreneurship is not just a nice to have skill in any organization or for any person. It's a must have skill. And by that, I mean, we need to learn how to take change in stride and turn it into a positive thing, not like, change, we're worried about it, and there's all this negative anxiety. Let's embrace change and see it as an opportunity to not just fix, problems, but it creates new opportunities. The world is going to keep going faster and faster. So during this pandemic at the beginning, we've talked about this at EDP, we've talked about this in our other courses, how it's important to be anti-fragile. And by that, when things change, you don't break. That's fragility. But people say, well, I'm not fragile, I'm resilient. No, resilience, the neutral condition. That's not good enough. We want people who are anti-fragile. These are people who get stronger in the face of change, uncertainty, adversity. And so to me, entrepreneurship is precisely that. It's how do you thrive? How do you lead in a world that's rapidly changing. And this has expanded the definition of entrepreneurship, Peter. I mean, we were talking about this just with some executive MBAs here at MIT this morning, and they're like, you have a messaging problem, because when you say entrepreneurship, people think founder. And if I'm not a founder, I'm not a real entrepreneur. This is not correct. In today's world, we need entrepreneurs at all levels of society. And founding there's nothing wrong with being a founder. It's a very pure one. But we need them in academia, as you well know. We need them in the government. We need them in large organizations. We need them in, the nonprofits. And that has become clearer than ever. And what it means is that an entrepreneur is someone who can not just be anti-fragile, but part of being anti-fragile is having fast clock speed, adjusting to the situation quickly, and taking a negative and turning it into a positive, as the great entrepreneur Biggie Smalls said. But I think that's been the clearest thing that's come out of it. I could go into more details if you'd like, but I think that's the overall message that I want to leave for people. The world's going to keep going faster and faster and faster. And as it goes faster, it's the entrepreneurs who are going to be the leaders. In the old days, when I first started, it was about management. How do you take an existing system, optimize it, make it more predictable, kind of have this steady growth? That's not the way it works anymore. If you were a just-in-time manufacturing expert, 2 years ago, you're in trouble today, because those supply chains broke when COVID hit. Oh, you're on mute, Peter.
Didn't mean me.
It wouldn't be a good virtual session if some old white guy didn't speak when he was really muted.
Right. On this occasion, I believe somebody actually muted me. I'm gonna blame the AI. That seems like a fair thing to do. But I was paying attention to the chat then, Bill, as you were talking, and Mickey School actually asked an interesting question, given what you were describing. What about intrapreneurship? Is that still a thing, or is it now just an encompassing term as far as you're concerned?
No, it's funny, because people used to say intrapreneurship, corporate entrepreneurship, it's an oxymoron, it can't happen. And that is just so not true. It must happen. And in fact, when COVID hit, if you had no entrepreneurs in your organization, you were smoked. You were in trouble. So corporate entrepreneurship is absolutely on the table. To be honest, it is more complicated than, just pure founder entrepreneurship, startup entrepreneurship. So intrapreneurship absolutely is. It's a more complicated problem. It's one that we as a society need to deal with, because if you're just an entrepreneur doing a startup, that'll get the low-hanging fruit. And I'm not saying that's not good. I love that. That's where, that's my beachhead market for sure. That's where I've cut my teeth. But if you want to get that higher fruit, if you want to affect climate change, you can't just do it with startups. You're going to have to turn around these big companies like Amazon. So we need corporate entrepreneurs. We need intrapreneurs. So it absolutely is not an oxymoron. It can be, because people can think that, because it's very hard to do. But we as a society need it. And there's no reason why it can't exist. It's just harder. Corporate entrepreneurship, the goal of any entrepreneur is to accumulate assets. It's to get customers. It's to have product. It's to have investors. It's to have, processes that protect all the different stakeholders. And as a startup, you have none of that. So the goal of a startup is to become an established organization, and you're trying to build up these assets. But here's the problem. Those assets give you more inertia, and as you get them, you're not as nimble and you're not as quick. And we talked about clock speed being important. But if I have those assets and I can get the clock speed, then I should be a killer at being innovative and changing the world and getting that fruit that's higher up on the tree.
That's interesting. Oftentimes, I've heard you reflect on the fact that one of the challenges for entrepreneurs is, there are many ways that they have to interact and deal with large established businesses and governments and other kinds of organizations. Is that still, a big challenge, or do you think that people in large organizations are much more accepting now as the economy has evolved?
Well, that's this is a real systematic problem. I mean, In the old days, so if you think of a system where you get promoted, and then as you get promoted, you got promoted for something that was successful 5 or 10 years ago. And then you get promoted, and now you get higher and higher in a big organization. And the stuff you were successful at was 20 years ago. So what's hardwired into you is that world. So to me, it's like mainframe computers. Oh, now it's personal computers. But the world's so moved on. And what happens is if you don't hit that organization and force it otherwise, it will get a lot of inertia and it will get very slow at innovating. Now, how do you get around that? It's very clear now through the research that companies that don't innovate are going to die. That's very, very clear. Even General Electric, who we thought would never, and they innovated pretty well. So what you're seeing now is you're seeing at the board level, the CEOs are understanding that just like it's not the strongest species that survives, it's not the one that's the most intelligent, it's not even the one that has the most money, but I'll stay with the Darwin one. It's not the most intelligent, it's not the strongest, it's the one that adapts to change. And so corporations now, organizations understand that they have to innovate. They have to be more entrepreneurial, or they will die, just as the studies show. They will become the next, Sears and Roebuck. They'll become the next, kind of Barnes and Noble. You have to constantly iterate. You have to constantly innovate on it. And that's what entrepreneurs do. So they're getting this pressure from above, and hopefully they're getting this pressure from below, from the customers. And so it overcomes this inertia in the middle of these larger organizations. So I'm not saying that it's gone. It's not gone. It will always be there kind of by a natural evolution. But what I'm saying is that there's more of an imperative to deal with it. And upper management is certainly more advocating for that, evangelizing this innovation and being ready for this disruption. And they're seeing it from the bottom. It's that middle that now is getting it on both sides and hopefully more receptive to it than ever before.
So there's an important element around entrepreneurship that's about mindset and attitude that you're describing. You're also quite well known for talking about entrepreneurship as being a skill set.
Yes.
Could you say a little bit more about why you believe that and what you think that set of skills really are?
Yeah, so we really emphasize that entrepreneurship is three things. It's a mindset. If you're not willing to be different, if you're not willing to push the status quo, you're not going to be an entrepreneur. If you're just like, let's optimize the existing system, let's just continue to refine it, make it better, that's not the spirit of a pirate that we're looking for. We're looking for people who want to hack the system, that want to make it better. And this is why MIT, quite honestly, of all the organizations I've ever seen, is the best for entrepreneurship, because we have literally a hacking mentality. How do you hack the system and make it better? Hacking not being a criminal activity. It's just kind of like, how do you make the system better? As Raphael Reif said at graduation, go out and rewire society to make it better. Hack the system. So that's the mindset. If all the fish are swimming this way, do you get excited about swimming the other way? Even if sometimes you're wrong, it's worth it because it's so exciting. That's the mindset. The skill set, is really the disciplined entrepreneurship approach that we talk about in the classes. It's, how do you go from idea to product? How do you go from idea to product to new venture to change the world? And that's the knowledge. So we talk about, first of all, you got to have the heart, then you got to have the head. That's the knowledge. But knowledge is never enough by itself. Even if you have the mindset and I know how to go into battle, you have to be trained how to do it. So the third H we talk about is the heart, the head, and then the hand. Can you actually do it? And this is the training. This is the apprenticeship model that you have to go through. So I have to want to do it, understand it, fight through all the difficulties of being an entrepreneur. I have to know what to do, and I actually have to be able to do it. That's a capability. And the last H, which really came later in this whole process, is home. yes, I have to have the heart, the head to know what to do, the hand, the capability, but I also have to have the community to do it. That's the home. And why is that? Because entrepreneurship is much more efficient than it is at larger organizations, because entrepreneurship was defined as the pursuit of opportunities with resources beyond your control. And this is by Howard Stevenson at Harvard. This is a really good definition, because as an entrepreneur, you don't have all the resources. When I was at IBM, we had all the resources, and it was a command, control, and conquer approach. But here, I'll call you up here. I'll say, "Hey, Peter, can you help me out on this?" And then you'll think, "Wait a second, is Bill helpful to me? Is this someone that I want in my community?" And if the answer is yes, then you'll help me, knowing that you're going to get something back. And that distributed model of people helping each other is much more efficient and much more rapid in giving you the clock speed to be able to respond to opportunities. I'll just give you one simple example. When COVID hit, our students were unmoored. They really didn't know what to do, and so I knew that we really needed to help them in this time, and so we wanted to create this anti-fragile speaker series. So literally within like days, I called people up and said, "Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Will you help me?" And I had built up enough credibility with my helping them that they came, and we had this all-star lineup for our students, which now has gone, the Anti-Fragile Speaker Series has been viewed by 40,000 people. And the only reason I was able to do that is because I essentially paid it forward before. And that is that's a mode of operating. So it's not just a mindset, it's the skill set, which is the knowledge. The mindset is the heart we talk about. The skill set is the head and the hand. That's the theory and practice. But the home is kind of the way of operating, this distributed kind of community-based model. And let me just be clear. By community-based model, I do not mean commune. I do not mean how many people you have friends on. I know we're on LinkedIn. The question is, if I call you up, Peter, A, will you return my call because you know that I'm a good community member? And if I'm not, if I'm always a taker, then you shouldn't return my call, because I'm a taker. That's not a good community member. But if not only do I know you, you will respond to me. And then if I ask you to do something, you will do it because I built up this social capital. So I hope that answers your question. It's a mindset and a skill set, but it's also a way of operating. And that's what entrepreneurship is. You see that in a beautiful way in founders of companies or early joiners of startups. But that mindset, that skill set and way of operating is much bigger than startups.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I think from that explanation, we can all see that those attributes really do span every kind of organization, right? And that we might be in, whether it is a startup or a large organization. An interesting question that came in, I think it was from, I'm just looking up the list, I'll miss the name, but really the gist of it was, do you have any examples in mind when you think about, what are entrepreneurial ventures that really are exemplifying, particularly that sort of community aspect of the home?
Yeah. So I just talked about this one in our Delta V. So this is the most busy time of the year for us, because we are now busier than it's ever been at our center, because we have our summer accelerator, which wraps up, which is called Delta V. And we just had all our presentations from that, which is just the best day of the year at MIT, because all these people, the best of the best, are presenting it, what they've achieved over the past year. And the new students are coming in to watch it. So we have thousands of people watching our previous students, and they're on display. Then we have all the new students coming in. But I talked about Tyler Spalding, and how Tyler Spalding came into our center. So first of all, undergraduate computer science. This is an extraordinary story, but it just it's an example of success in this. So Tyler comes into our center, and he's always helping everybody out. He's a computer scientist, but he's also getting an MBA at MIT Sloan. And he's literally such a good computer scientists, rocket scientists, and when NASA had problems, all of a sudden Tyler would be gone for a few days because I called him back. Not your typical MBA, but he would sit at our center and he'd work on this product called Style Seek. And it was him kind of working on that, but then he would help everybody out on it. And so he's learning about all this other stuff from people. And one of the things he was doing, this amazing 11 years ago, he told me about it, and I vaguely remember it, but he was mining some Bitcoin. So anyway, he goes off and he's making this simple first kind of pancake or first startup. We call it a pancake because the first one's never as good as the second or third. And it's called Style Seek. It's basically an AI system to help guys get good clothes. And it would ask you which kind of movies do you like? Which kind of cars do you like to drive? Which kind of beer do you or beverages do you like to drink? And then it would show you some other things. And then he did a really nice job on this. He got a lot of help from people. They helped him, and he always helped them on that. And then they got bought by this company, Raise.com. And Raise.com took the idea of kind of preference engine, moved it into retail space. So he learns a lot about the retail space in Raise.com. And he's kind of doing that, and it goes really well, and they get bought. And so he's like, I gotta do something bigger than this. And so now he leaves Raise. He was CTO there. They've done really well, and he takes a day off, and he goes, I know exactly what I should do. Retail is broke, and so he uses all the contacts he had, and he starts this new company called Flexa, and he's basically going to help retailers not have to pay the very high rates that they have to pay to MasterCard and Visa. He's going to do it for free. Now, you'd say, how can he do it for free? Because of his understanding of Bitcoin, what he does is he'll give a retailer a token, and then they just use his system, and the value of the token goes up. Now, how can this be a viable business model? Because he owns a pile of these tokens too. So when the token is successful, it all goes up. Flexa is incredibly successful. And they get asked by the government of El Salvador, you've probably heard about this, to build the infrastructure for the first nation in the world to use Bitcoin as a national currency. This is just mind-blowing. And who's doing it? Tyler Spalding at Flexa. And then you say, how many people does Tyler Spalding have in his company? I would put it out there. How many people do you think that? He has 15 people at his company. Because he uses this community-based model, he's helped people, they help him, and he can do these amazing things without having to build a multi-thousand person organization like we used to do at IBM. And it's truly, and let me just end the story because I just love it. Not just because Tyler's my student and he's a great guy and he's always paid it forward, but what he's doing is not only, it's not just Bitcoin. What he's going to do is going to make the world fundamentally a better place. That's his goal. His goal is not just to make money. His goal is to make the world a better place. So when you see a situation in Afghanistan where women, they have trouble because if they get money, they can't do anything with that money because it's not theirs. They put it in the bank, the government can take it away. If you want to send money to them, it's the same thing. They don't have financial independence. They don't have financial security. What this system will do is it will give them financial security because the government won't be able to take it away. Other people won't be able to take it away because this is the promise, the positive part of Bitcoin. It's something that will transcend. It's kind of democratizing the financial system so they can't be as corrupted as they are otherwise. So I'm not saying this will be perfect. This isn't just going to be an elevator that goes to the moon. It's an entrepreneur. Flex is going to struggle as they go through things. There's going to be some broken glass now, but ultimately the goal of this is just so inspiring to me. And it's all built off this mindset, skill set, and way of operating that we just talked about.
That's a great example. So it was looking at some of the comments as well. Yun Jong Lee had asked earlier about, how does an entrepreneurial approach help us solve some of the great challenges that we face? She was referencing, for example, climate change.
Yeah.
And hearing the story now, it makes me wonder sort of twofold, really. On the one hand, to what extent do you think it's important or essential that, especially these days, that anybody who is embarking on a kind of an entrepreneurial venture is also, as you said, having an important, keeping an eye on how this makes a positive contribution, solves, real problems in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
There a social responsibility imperative now if you're really in this entrepreneurial space?
Yeah. No, this is we got into this in the Anti-Fragile Speaker series. Look, entrepreneurship, by the way that we define it and the way I think it's and there's a lot of us, entrepreneurship is not profiteering. Profiteering is something different. That's a purely economic activity. Entrepreneurship, I would argue, is an ethical activity. And if you want to be a high growth and innovation driven entrepreneur, what you do has to be about more than just the money. Because if it's just about the money, there are going to be other options. If my students here who are working their tail off to do something, if they don't believe in what they're doing, if it's just about money, they will not last. They will go across the street or streets and go get an interview at Goldman Sachs or some investment bank and go work there. They can do that. But when you're doing something for a cause, because entrepreneurship goes up and down, and you have to have something that you believe in to stay with that journey. And you can't recruit other people if it's just about money, because if they come for the money, then they're going to get an offer someplace else and they're going to be gone. And entrepreneurship is that fighting through those times of adversity, those walls that seem like you can't get around them, you can't get over them, you can't. That's what entrepreneurship is. It's doing something that's never been done before. It's overcoming that. So if it's just about the money, I would argue that's profiteering, and that's a different activity. That's not entrepreneurship. And I'm not doing justice to my colleagues, Tom Byers from Stanford and John Field from Duke and Laura Dunham from St. John's out in Minnesota. They have we did a whole hour on this, making the ethical decision in entrepreneurship in that Anti-Fragile Speaker series. And I would point people to that. And I think that's really important, Peter. And that's what we see with people today is they want to impact climate change. They want to get financial inclusion. Like when you talk to Tyler, his company is just blown up. It's now worth billions of dollars. But what gets him up every day is not the money. It's like, how do we get financial inclusion? How do we democratize this financial system that's kind of built against, it's unfair. And that motivation is what you need if you want to be a great entrepreneur.
That's great. I see some questions also. I think Rajiv Dattara is asking about, just sticking with this example of Tyler. You've talked in the past about also, the challenges and opportunities that come, for example, from government regulation, without getting into sort of the intricacies of Bitcoin and whether that's going to, that market is going to be shifted perhaps or perhaps not by government intervention. But more generally, as you think about entrepreneurship, what's your, how do you advise the entrepreneurs that you work with how to deal with, if you like, bureaucracy and government and sort of the political landscape in which you're often trying to do something that's never been seen before?
Well, the first thing is, if you can avoid it, avoid it. but you can't avoid it if you're working in energy, climate change, financial services, many of the things. If you just said, I'm only going to do stuff that has no government involvement in it, that's a very small world. What you have to do is acknowledge it and integrate people on your team who can remove those friction points and potentially use them to your advantage. Because look, I don't believe that these are all, I don't believe people are inherently bad. I believe if you give them the wrong incentives that they'll become friction points. But you have to figure out, and then you have to change the incentives if you can as well. And I just want to clarify, as you said, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Bitcoin is all good. there's some terrible things that are done with that. Just like there's some terrible things that are done with computers. The idea is, how do we take things that are going to happen and use them in a positive way as opposed to a negative way? And I think we all understand that. And the purpose of entrepreneurship is to fight through that and figure these things out and push them towards the good things as opposed to the bad things. If we just said, well, technology isn't, well, then that would be a real problem. But I'm not here to philosophize too much. I just want to say entrepreneurship is an ethical activity that people who have, we talk about the raison d'etre, and the raison d'etre is personal. I want to do this because I'm going to make a positive impact on the world. I'm going to put a positive dent in the universe. And that's critically important because all of us, I hope, want to do something about climate change. And if you go to a climate change talk, it's overwhelming what needs to be done. But see, entrepreneurship is the process of saying, okay, it's overwhelming, but I want to do something. Here's what I can do. Now let's break this down. I'm going to do one thing. We're going to get here. We're going to nail that. And then when we nail it, we're going to scale it. And if I can do that, I'm doing a big part here. I might not solve everything, but I'm a positive contributor. Then another entrepreneur will come along and say, hey, if you're Commonwealth Fusion and you can do fusion, great. Now someone else comes along as an entrepreneur, said they're doing that. Now we need to have someone who changes the regulatory, environment. And that person's an entrepreneur too. And that person deserves equal respect as the person who builds the financial organization.
Great, that's helpful. Maybe we can switch gears a little bit. I'm just looking back up and see a term that I'm not familiar with, but Mimi Gears asked, what role, if any, do you see returnships in fueling the momentum of entrepreneurship? I guess this is returnships. It sounds a bit like interns, I suppose, but people who are returning perhaps into large companies from an entrepreneurial experience. Maybe the opposite of you, Bill. You left a large company and became an entrepreneur. People go in the other direction too. And do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm just about to go down to Texas, and we're going to be talking about this very thing. How do you? It's this kind of, I think, if I have it right, returnships are kind of like workforce transitioning. You can't go to Texas and say, hey, everybody, forget oil. We're all going to do solar now. That's like you've just completely pulled the rug out from under them, right? And these are human beings. How do we go from saying, okay, this is the workforce. How do we move them to something that can leverage their skills and their dignity? How do we do that? And how do we come up with those new opportunities? Maybe it's geothermal. Maybe it's green. It's green chemicals, green molecules. How do we take what they are and do that? And that is a very important thing for us as society. And that's not something, quite honestly, that I cover in my books and writings very often. But I think that having an entrepreneurs around is critically important to that, because they're going to identify the new opportunities. So let's just take the Texas for a second. They're going from oil and gas, and now oil and gas is going to be going down, and they want to keep their position. What assets do they have? What opportunities are there? And that's where the entrepreneurial process say, okay, so they can do this. So they have drilling, they have kind of these chemical plants, they have these other assets. Wait, what about geothermal? That looks like a good opportunity, but where are the opportunities in geothermal? Now we're into the entrepreneurial process. They have all these chemical plants. What should we do there? Is hydrogen, so it's kind of figuring out this riddle. That's the entrepreneurial process. But it's a collaborative thing when you talk about returnships. I hope that's the question.
I think so. It was a new term to me as well, so maybe we'll hear more in the chat.
I love Rich Antcliffe says, can we move from the philosophical to the practical? What is disciplined entrepreneurship? You're right, Rich. Let me just say, disciplined entrepreneurship is taking the field of entrepreneurship and saying there is no one singular answer. There is no one silver bullet. And disciplined entrepreneurship is a systematic way to go through entrepreneurship, to go from idea to product, that gives you the first principles in a sequential but not linear way, because there will never be any algorithm to do that. And there are all these different parts of it. You know, you've heard of design thinking. Well, we've got that integrated in here. You've heard of crossing the chasm. We've got that integrated into it. We've got all these different things that would step you through. And in fact, there's the diagram right there. So you can take a look. There are 2 books out there that will tell you all about that. There's online courses, Entrepreneurship 101, 102, 103.
Great. And Yun Zhong says, and please could you define anti-fragile while you're in definition mode?
Yeah. The first rule of engineering is define your terms. Anti-fragility is when, when there's adversity, people break. When there's uncertainty, they break. That's fragility. Clearly a bad condition, right? Resilience is, COVID happened. I didn't break. I just kept going. I know. I'm going to keep doing it. It's basically stubbornness. That is not the goal. That's the neutral condition. And we saw some of the most colossal crashes of people who tried to ignore it and didn't just, break. They would have been better off breaking quickly. Anti-fragility is, here comes COVID. It's the positive condition. COVID happened, and it's something that we didn't want. But you know what? There's got to be some opportunities here. Let's figure out how we're going to solve this problem and where the new opportunities are quickly. And we're going to do that. If you think of a basketball player like Larry Bird of the Boston Celtics, he was a good player, a very, very good player at the beginning of the game. But what made Larry Bird probably arguably the greatest player of all time is when it got to the parts of the game where at the end of the game, when it got chaotic and things were happening or they were losing, he would pull everyone together and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go forward. So adversity was not something that was feared. Change was not something that was feared. It was something that was embraced, and they got stronger because of it. So that's what anti-fragility is.
Great, that's helpful. Thanks. And we've had some clarifications in the chat that returnships usually refer to people returning to the workforce after a gap. And I think I could connect that to some of what you were just talking about, Bill, in as much as, before COVID, there were many reasons that people would take career gaps as well to look after families or loved ones, but perhaps. And so I guess maybe the thrust of this question is, do you think there's something that where there's an opportunity, a role for this more entrepreneurial way of creating opportunities to be something which may be helpful to people in that situation, that, trying to find your way back into a corporate environment, in the traditional way versus maybe looking for more entrepreneurial paths to get back. And maybe I could add in, what are your thoughts about the implications for that around sort of diversity and social mobility as well? So people that maybe are in situations where they don't have, that they're not living somewhere where there, as you said, that there's a large firm that they can knock on the door and will be looking to hire people. So maybe you could just pull those threads together. I think that'd be very interesting.
So let me try. So first of all, we talked about if someone left a corporation and then they've been out of the workforce and they want to come back, that corporation and the way that they were working doesn't exist anymore. So they need to be retrained. If they go and think they're doing the same thing, it is not. Even in utilities, even in very successful companies, MIT, it's dramatically changed. So you have to constantly adapt. Now, when you're coming back into the workforce as a returnship, we're seeing a lot of people, they need that training. And that training that they need, it might be some basic skills. Here's how you use a computer. Here's new financing. Here's how new financials work, whatever it is. But I would say above all else, it's this mindset, skill set, and way of operating that we've been talking about. And we're seeing great success. I think one of the fastest growing areas is older people becoming entrepreneurs. And that makes a heck of a lot of sense to me. because in some sense there's bias against older people in the workforce, and yet they're still very good. Now they have to be young of mind. They have to be willing to embrace change. They can't be talking about, no, we got to go back to this. And, if they're willing to be entrepreneurial, it certainly seems to me that older people, it's a real good path for them. But you have to be skilled up and you have to build that community. Diversity. The interesting thing about entrepreneurship is it used to be, when I first started, if I knew most of the entrepreneurship people, like they were in Boston or they were in Silicon Valley. That is not true today. It has become a global phenomenon. There are companies coming from all kinds of places. Nova Scotia. It's everywhere now. As Thomas Friedman said, the world's flat because of technology. The world has become a lot flatter in the sense that entrepreneurship is not nearly as concentrated in New York and Silicon Valley as it once was. Yeah, those places are hotbeds. They have advantages, but you can start a company anywhere today because of the technology, and that's a really great thing because you're empowering people. There's a lot of creativity that can come. The harder part becomes, quite honestly, Peter, is when you scale it. That's when it's helpful to be in a place where there's a lot of other talent, because at the end of the day, you need that talent.
Right. So maybe we can shift gears once again. One of your fundamental claims, Bill, we heard it a few times today, is that entrepreneurship is something that people can learn and that they can be taught in some sense. So just how do you do that? And thinking about all the people that are watching this event today, most of them, I'm pretty certain, are not fortunate enough to be students in the MBA program or other students on the MIT campus. They're focal around the world. What's your advice on how to set about learning these skills? Or maybe you could tell us a bit more about how you set about doing that, maybe even in our exec ed programs, for example.
Yeah. So first of all, can entrepreneurship be taught? This used to be when I first started, doing this 10 years ago. I wasn't sure this was true. It is as clear as day that entrepreneurship can be taught. If anybody wants to debate that, the data is firmly on the side that it can be taught. The more time, and it's so obvious when you sit down and think about it, if you've been an entrepreneur multiple times, the first time you don't know what you're doing. The second time you kind of do the third time, all right, I got this. I'm really, so clearly it can be learned. And we're teaching that today with the principles we have through the apprenticeship model, right? Through the 4-H model. You cannot have an algorithm for entrepreneurship. It is not a science. It is a craft. And by that, I mean there are first principles that increase your odds of success, but anybody can do it, just like pottery. And you have to learn it by knowing the first principles, but you have to put them into practice through the apprenticeship model. There's a great study done by John Napton of Northern Ireland, Catalyst program, and I put it up, and we can put a link to it. It's on the Disciplined Entrepreneurship website. And I think the article is called How Do I Have Confidence That What We're Teaching is Working? And he's got an extraordinary study of people who went to the programs and show what happened to them afterwards. And we've seen the same thing through our study at MIT, which I also referenced in that article. So through these, how do you learn them? You can't, we have an online class. I encourage you to do that on edX. Entrepreneurship 101, 102, 103, but you've got to do it, and you've got to do it with other people. And I know this is for executive education, but I wouldn't be saying it if it were not true. The entrepreneurship development program is extraordinary in that you come to MIT, you are in the midst of this, and you have to do it. We lead you through it in this apprenticeship model, and you do it with these other people who become lifelong friends of yours. The WhatsApp group, I don't know how many people we have out there, but the EDP program from 2019, is there anybody out there from it? This WhatsApp group, I was on it for a while. It's remarkable how much they gain from each other. And so that's how you really have to learn it. It's not a spectator sport. It's not a science. It's a craft that you have to learn by doing, and doing it with other people is definitely the way to do it.
So EDP, the Entrepreneurship Development Program, this returns to something that we started out talking about. That's an in-person, on-campus, truly intensive for a week. You pack into a week what our on-campus students may take, a semester or years to experience. And in contrast, you also mentioned that there's, I think it's on the screen at the moment as well, you've developed a live online short version of that, which is coming up in October. What's the difference between the people thinking about, should I consider taking the live online, or should I try to come to MIT for that week of the 16th of January? We hope that will, of course, be possible with COVID on it.
Well, let me just say this, and we were talking about this beforehand, and I'll tell, we're just coming back to school now, and in person. We did school all last year, and I'll tell you, it broke my heart, because it's impossible to teach entrepreneurship online. Can you make some progress? It's better than not teaching it. But entrepreneurship at its core is about integrating multiple signals that are coming at you and processing them and taking a step forward and then seeing what's happened. And it's not always intentional. It's the serendipitous collisions I have as I'm walking out here. It's someone I see as I'm walking across campus. It's, it's not just I set up a call and we're on Zoom. It's all this kind of dealing with this environment. And we were unable to have that last year. I mean, we did what we could with Zoom, and we made progress. But we just had yesterday, and we thought we were going to have 50, maybe 200 people come to a block party that we had for students at MIT. We had hundreds of people show up. The energy was explosive of people just, they want entrepreneurship, but they want to do it in person. Now, maybe people there just to hear the music and, be with their friends. But I think that's what's critical. Now, does that mean it's EDP or nothing? No. Some of us can't afford to come to MIT. It's much more expensive to get on a plane, train, or automobile to come to MIT. Maybe we can't take as much time. So we do try to do what we can online. And that's what the course in October is about. And it is interactive. We keep the size so it is interactive, but still we have breakout rooms. They do projects, but that kind of signal input that's coming and how you adjust and iterate very, very quickly on it and go through. It's just impossible to replace that. I'm sorry.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. And again, the links to those course information, I think, are on the screen if anybody wants to explore those a little bit further. I think we're probably coming to the time when we need to start wrapping up, Bill. Of all the resources that you've talked about, time is the one that we can never escape from. And I think all entrepreneurs know that it's a truly precious resource as well. And so perhaps a couple of parting thoughts and questions. And the one I like to ask most is really just sitting here now. We've got hundreds of people who are watching, and thousands of people who will watch the recording in due course. And if the only bit that they saw was the next 2 minutes, what's your takeaway? One thing that people who are really interested in exploring a more entrepreneurial future for themselves, what's the most fundamental piece of advice that you have for them? What can we all do, perhaps as soon as we hang up the phone or this call, if we're struck by your comments and we want to do something, but we just don't know where to start?
Okay, so let me just so first of all, Anders, that's who I was talking about. What a class you guys had. That's there's someone on the chat, Anders, who was in the EDP 2020. And if you see this WhatsApp group, it's just on fire. And it's, the energy that you get from each other is critical. if I would say it's the 4 H's, the heart, the head, the hands, and the home, remember that. I think, the first thing to do about entrepreneurship is to start engaging with it, to go out there, you're going to make mistakes, but Newton's first law of motion is a body at rest will remain at rest. A body in motion will continue in motion. And you've got to get out there and get started and do it. And it's not an individual sport, it's a team sport. Don't sit around and say, I need the perfect idea. The idea, if you have an idea, it's not the right idea. It's going to have to change dramatically. Find other people, find your entrepreneurial soulmate, start working on stuff, get on the field and do it. I do want to say, for our more advanced entrepreneurs, this is something that we're doing today. One of the, if any of you have seen it, I've written about this. The two things I'm focused on right now are how do we make finance more accessible to entrepreneurs in general without having to get finance. Finance for dummies or for entrepreneurs, not that entrepreneurs are dummies, but I don't need to be an accountant. I don't want to get an MBA. I don't have time to. So we're doing some work on that with Antoinette Shore and Matt Rhodes-Croft at MIT. How do we take that and make it more accessible to people? Because I see a lot of people being entrepreneurs and they're very good at product and customer. They're getting product market fit, but they don't understand the finance. And I kind of feel like you're not a complete entrepreneur unless you can pull that into it. So the other thing, but I spent a lot of time this summer thinking hard about, and we have a new class on this, is how entrepreneurial sales, how important it is to be good at sales. Now, we've been teaching a sales class here for 20 years that's very similar to what I got when I was trained at IBM. How do you execute a sales call? The problem is that sales has changed dramatically over the past 20 years. One of my sons has a company that's doing 60 million in revenue. He doesn't have one salesperson. How can that be for someone who's, was taught in sales at IBM, in one of my rotations? Well, that's because we have stuff called product-led growth. We have social media, and so the sales is changing. And now the closer I looked at it, you realize you can have product market fit. You can say, this is what we really emphasize in discipline. You get a product market fit. And then what we need is channel market fit after that. How do you go to market? And we deal with that in disciplined entrepreneurship. But I'm thinking a lot more these days is we're really good at product market fit. How do we get better at channel market fit? This is go-to-market strategy. And with all the new tools that are coming at us now, and that's something that's really kind of at the forefront of what we're thinking about. Because if you take, HubSpot and Marketo, they essentially have the same product. If someone's here from HubSpot, they'd argue with me, no, their product's better. Marketo, they say their product. It's essentially the same product. Yet both companies are very successful and they address fundamentally different markets. One sells for 50,000 going up and one sells for 5,000 going up. And why is that? Because it's not about product as much as it is about channel market fit. How do we go to market? What are those sales and marketing tools? See, in the old days, I was taught, here's sales and here's marketing. Marketing gets leads and they give them to sales. It's a waterfall. But now that's not the case. Like in organizations, marketing and sales interact. It's like this. And then you also have customer success, which is feeding information to it. And you have the product group, which is designing the product so it can sell. So I think this is a really, really interesting area that we're looking into. And we're going to be talking about this in the upcoming EDP class in particular, but we're really sorting through that now. So I want to give something to the people who, this is they're kind of curious entrepreneurs, but also the people like Anders who've gone through some of the program before.
That's great. Thanks, Bill. And picking up on something that you mentioned a couple of times going through as well. Of course, not everybody has the opportunity to be able to come to a program like EDP. And as you mentioned, a lot of your foundational work is also in your book, in your online courses on edX, which are freely available to the world. So that's another of the ways that you have been paying it forward. And I wanted to make sure that the many people who will see this, who maybe won't have the opportunity to come to MIT themselves or participate in one of our executive education courses, have access to the really inspiring ideas and practical advice and learning materials and ways of really getting to grips with this topic and making a difference for themselves as well. So, Bill, thank you for making yourself available to the world in all of these many ways.
No, thank you, Peter. And I thank MIT every day for the platform, because we all want to make the world a better place. And my belief is what I can do is, if we can produce more entrepreneurs, we can produce better entrepreneurs, and they're connected. This will help us with climate change. This will help us with social inequities. It'll help us with the healthcare. It'll help us with all our problems. We just need more entrepreneurs, better entrepreneurs, and more connected entrepreneurs. And if we do that, we put a dent in the universe. So I'm very grateful to MIT to be able to have this, and that's what I want to do.
On that note, I think that's a great place to thank you, Bill, once again for taking this time with us. We know how busy you are. Thank all of you who've been tuning in live, and people who I know will also be looking at the recording. And please do continue the conversation on our LinkedIn page. Look forward to seeing some, maybe many of you online or on the campus at MIT. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing my friend Bill Aulet in the flesh on campus again. Now we're all theoretically back in Kendall Square. This has been tremendous. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And keep an eye out for the next in our live LinkedIn Live and webinar series from MIT Sloan Executive Education, where we bring you insights, experience, and a lot of, I think, fun as well with luminaries from MIT. Today, it was Bill Aulet. Once again, thanks, Bill. You're a star. We're glad that you're at MIT as much as you're glad that you're at MIT.
Yes, thank you.